everybody. Happy New Year. Nice to see you.
Hello.
I hope you're staying warm out there. It's kind of crazy. So let's see, we're still loading up. Just give us a moment. We have a whole bunch of people today. Thanks so much for coming. We have over 110 people, which is great. A lot of snow last night, some icing conditions earlier in the week. But what's going on? So usually we have, it's First Friday with Fran, and it's BYOB, bring your own beverage. So today I'm going with a Blue Moon Belgian White for the first time in a while. I've been non-alcoholic for the past 6 months or so, but this is getting to me a little bit at this point. I would suggest, though, if you have access, make yourself perhaps a hot toddy, either with alcohol or without, or perhaps an Irish coffee, I would suggest. Today is a beautiful day for an Irish coffee out there. Got a little whipped cream and some coffee, always a good thing. If you want to do it non-alcoholic, that's fine too. So all of you who attend regularly, we have a lot of new people today, but for those of you who attend regularly, you know that these webinars are provided for general informational purposes only, and they're not legal advice. They don't form an attorney-client relationship with us, and the information does not constitute legal advice, nor will it be considered confidential. If you go in the chat room at the bottom and ask us a crazy question, we are going to discuss it out in the open here. So don't put anything in the chat room that you think might be confidential. To obtain legal advice, you'll have to seek out and get an attorney fee agreement. The one thing I wanted to mention, hugely disappointed with all our friends today because we have no dog of the day. No dog of the day. That's a cardinal sin, no dog of the day. So we got no dog of the day sent in. If you do have a dog, and if there are no dogs, we will take other animals. We do like other animals as well. We will put the dog up or the other animal submitted during next month's session. The other thing I wanted to mention is, as you know, with our dogs of the day, we at the end of the year, we put together a dog of the day calendar. All the dog of the day calendars are in. We've sent, many of you already have the dog of the day calendar. Nancy has her dog with her, I think there. Hi, Nancy. And we will send you a calendar if you have not gotten one yet. Oh, Wayne has one too. I like it. There we go, Wayne. So we will send you a dog of the day calendar if you haven't gotten one. Just please let us know. The big news, as you know, is the statutory immunity lapsed at the end of 2021. That was the statutory COVID immunity. It lapsed and the legislature did not renew it. Really disappointing from the association world standpoint. There were lawyers out there suggesting cancel all events immediately, have no functions, close down all your facilities immediately, back to square one, which was March of last year. We have not advised our associations to do that. Some of you are our clients, some of you are not. What we've said is lawyers don't make decisions for associations boards. Boards make decisions for associations boards. And in light of that, we've done our best to guide our clients to consider the risks and benefits of continuing with activities, not continuing with activities, modifying activities, modifying facilities, opening certain facilities, closing certain facilities, etc. So the statutory immunity is gone for the moment. There were 2 bills out there. Those bills did not pass at the moment. So they could be reintroduced and perhaps presented, although they may not. There seems to be some vibe out there that they may not move at all. I hope they do move because I think it would help all of us. We don't know what the future holds. I want to shut down one thing here. For those of you who have been on the First Friday with Fran, many times you've seen these charts before, but I just want to show you kind of what's happening at the moment. Share screen. Let me go right there. Share. So this is the trend line. I hope you can see that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is the trend line for New Jersey right now in number of COVID cases on a daily basis. Right. And we see here we're looking at March, April, May of 2020, kind of when this mess all started. And then it got crazy, if you remember, last Christmas, November, Thanksgiving, etc. And then we got all the way out here to January, and it just goes off the charts with transmission, just off the charts with transmission. And honestly, in your day-to-day lives, you've probably, this is from the CDC, by the way, in your daily lives, you've probably heard that through your friends and neighbors. I can tell you absolutely, we have a law firm of basically 25 people here, and we have had every day new people talking about new cases, either in people working here or in their families at home. So everyone is juggling infection right now, what to do with infection and what not to do. So then we're looking at New Jersey daily cases. Here's the good news. Here's the good news, everybody. So New Jersey again, the daily death rate, way down here, right? So this is the daily death rate back in March, April, May of 2000, right? That's the beginning of the pandemic. And then we go down, we have the flattening of the curve, if you will, down here in the initial flattening period, the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas of last year. And then we see the vaccinations working. And then we see the deaths staying fairly low relative to the amount of infection and contagion that's going on right now. So that is a wonderful thing. That's a great thing, right? I'm going to stop share for a moment. Now, I want to show you one other thing here. One thing, so for those of you who also have known me, I'm a big fan of transparency, and I also am a big fan of information. I've often said there can never be too much information, and that's not true. And let me show you something. So let's see, where am I? Oh, I can't find it right now. I can't see it. I'm going to have to get back to you on that because it's not appearing on my screen at the moment. There we go. Let's see. So if you go to the CDC guidelines now, in terms of helping protect yourself in case of positive tests for COVID-19 or exposure to someone who is positive COVID-19, it's almost like reading the tax code. It's really almost impossible to digest. I'm not trying to discourage you from going to the CDC webpage, but I will say that the New Jersey Department of Health, and we can send this out if you'd like us to, the New Jersey Department of Health has put together a nice summary, and that's what you see on your screen here, of the current COVID guidelines coming from the CDC. Because again, looking at the CDC website at yourself, it kind of is like reading the tax code. So I'm going to go through this real fast. If you test positive for COVID-19, isolate. Isolate, that means stay home and stay away from other people, even those people in your household. So this applies to everyone regardless of vaccination status. So stay home for 5 days. If you have no symptoms or your symptoms are resolving, after 5 days, you can leave your house. However, continue to wear a mask around others for 5 additional days. If you have a fever, continue to stay home until your fever resolves, right? So that's if you test positive for COVID-19. The direction from the CDC currently is to isolate under these guidelines. Step 2, if you will, and this again is digested by the New Jersey Department of Health. If you're exposed to someone with COVID-19, you quarantine, which means you can stay in your house, but you don't necessarily have to isolate. You don't have to stay in one room, for example. If you have been boosted, right? So if you've had the booster shot or completed the primary series of Pfizer or Moderna vaccines within the last 6 months, or completed the primary series of J&J vaccine within the last 2 months. This is now we're starting to sound like the tax code, right? So if you've been near somebody who has had COVID-19, if you're exposed to somebody with COVID-19, and you're in one of these 3 categories, you have had the booster shot, you've completed the Pfizer or Moderna within the past 6 months, or you've had the J&J within the past 2 months, wear a mask around others for 10 days, test on day 5 if possible. If you have a fever, continue to stay home until your fever resolves. However, we're still reading the tax code, right? If you completed the primary series of Pfizer or Moderna vaccine 6 months ago and are not boosted, so it's been 6 months or more and you have not been boosted, or you completed a primary series of the J&J vaccine more than 2 months ago and have not been boosted, or you are totally unvaccinated, the guidance says stay home for 5 days. After that, continue to wear a mask around others for an additional 5 days. If you can't quarantine, you must wear a mask for at least 10 days. If you develop symptoms, get a test and stay at home. So that's that's a summary. It's a nice summary. It's much easier to follow than the actual CDC website guidelines. But again, feel free to go to the CDC website. This comes from a summary on the New Jersey Department of Health website that is based on the CDC website. All right, I'm going to keep going. As we saw in the curve there, the virus continues to proliferate. The good news is it does not seem as deadly, right? It doesn't seem as deadly. And it seems that the vaccines, although it doesn't seem to be stopping the transmission of the virus, it does seem to perhaps limit the amount of hospitalizations and death, which is a beautiful thing. Insurance coverage, no insurance coverage. So notwithstanding the expiration of the immunity, there is still no insurance coverage, which means there's no coverage for not only liability, there's no coverage for defense. When these nasty attorneys have to defend you, right, the associations have to pay those attorney fees out of pocket, which they would normally not have to do if the association's insurance coverage provided for that type of coverage. And Mike can jump in on the next one. I'm going to say real fast, and then Mike can jump with his thoughts on it. So risk management and tools. We talked about these over the past 2 years, right? Limit facilities, limit activities, again, within reason. Limit the capacity. Use masks. Heighten sanitation. Clean areas. Hand washing. Use releases, waivers, have them signed. Pass the immunity amendment if you have not already. Think about contact tracing for events. And then as we go into spring and summer 22, where are we going with our contracts, right? Because for all of you who have participated in this in the past, we know that contractors, vendors have been really difficult in trying to negotiate contracts in the past year or so for a couple reasons. Number one, they can't get employees. Nobody seems to want to work regularly anymore. And also there's sliding provisions in there where the association is requested to indemnify, defend, and hold harmless the vendor rather than the other way around. We, the association, do not want to indemnify, defend, and hold harmless our contractors. Number one, it's a huge liability. Number two, it may impact what insurance coverage you have, okay? So before the association steps up to indemnify, defend, and hold harmless one of its vendors, please reach out to your insurance professional and find out how that will play out under your current policy. Mike, you want to jump in there and talk? Mike cannot talk right now. He's muted for some reason. All right, I'm going to keep going.
I'll get him, Mike. I'll get him.
Okay, that's fine. So that's fine. So that's real brief on risk management. I want to talk a little.
Sorry.
There you go. There you go, Mike.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, so what we've been seeing is, more than anything, it depends on your community. And you certainly know better than we do the average age in your community, right? The general well-being of the community members. If you certainly have a community where the average age is in the 70s or 80s, you certainly want to be more restrictive than a non-restrictive age community. Certainly have the signs out that say, in your clubhouse, if you are unvaccinated, we strongly advise that you wear a mask. You need to have the hand sanitizers out. I'm having some communities require vaccinations. I know we've talked about this in the past, but just to gain access into the clubhouse and use any facilities, the association can require vaccinations with 2 exceptions. And this applies not just to community associations, to all businesses. There's the religious exception and the underlying medical condition exception. But other than that, you are permitted to require vaccinations. I do not necessarily recommend that we keep a copy of the vaccination status card on file, but rather note in the file whether or not the person is vaccinated and the date in which they were vaccinated and boosted. But again, it really depends on your community. Fran, now you're muted.
Yeah, no, I got it. So to jump in on the vaccination status, there is the New Jersey Department of Health website is pushing an app. It's called Docket. It's an app called Docket, which is supposed to give you access to your vaccination status, right? So, for example, if you lose your vaccination card or what have you, you can order another card through Docket, or you can actually have the proof through the Docket search that links to the New Jersey Department of Health. I downloaded the app this morning in an attempt to be able to show you on TV today how that works. But for some reason, the Docket app does not find my immunization information. So I'm going to have to work my way through that. Just be aware that it's out there. And if you want to look for the app itself, there you go. Thanks, Marcia. Marcia's just showing us an example at the bottom. Thanks, Marcia. That's cool. Great. So that's called the Docket app. It's available through the New Jersey Department of Health website and through the whatever your app store happens to be. There you go. There's Maddie too. Maddie's got it too. Thanks, Maddie. So let's see. I know there are going to be questions, but we wanted to touch on some additional things. So there's a new statute. There's a new statute that has been overlooked by most people in the industry because there's so much going on in the rest of our lives between the holidays, COVID craziness, and snow. There's a new statute that basically says associations within 90 days of, what is it, November 8th, Mike?
Yeah, November 7th, right.
On November 7th. Within 90 days of November 7th, associations are obligated to review their governing documents, the bylaws, master deed, declaration, etc., and find out if provisions in there violate discrimination prohibitions listed in the law against discrimination in New Jersey. So many of our association documents have no discriminatory provisions like that. What this statute does, however, is mandate that within 90 days of November 7th, every association review their master deed, bylaws, and declaration and make sure none of them are in there. What are some examples? So back in the day, right, the bad old days, there were documents that did say things like deeds could not be transferred based on race. Just to take a step back. The statute addresses both deeds, regular deeds in regular homeowner transfers, and also association governing documents. So it transfers both. So for example, I have a house where the deed goes way back into in time, and through my title search, I found that there was a deed at one time that limited transferees based on race. So for example, that deed language would be stricken today. In the association world, the association is required to review the governing documents and make sure there are no provisions in there that violate LAD. And with respect to restrictive covenants, let me just give you the language, because the language is fairly narrow as I interpret it. It's documents contain any restriction, covenant, or condition that prohibits or limits the covenant, the conveyance, encumbrance, rental, occupancy, or use of real property that is prohibited by LAD. So it's not a statute that is crazy broad. So some of the questions, and Mike's going to comment on this too, some of the questions that have been asked in there, does that mean anyone who would interpret anything any way that could be possibly discriminatory? I think the answer is no. No, there's narrow language. So someone, for example, said, hey, if my governing documents use personal pronouns that are gender specific, do I have to rewrite my entire set of governing documents? My interpretation of this law would be no. No, it doesn't. But if there's a restriction that impairs people's rights with respect to property based on illegal discrimination, they would have to go. The good news is if you had to amend your declaration or bylaws to eliminate provisions like that, you don't have to go to the crazy membership vote, right? The board could pass it just as a matter of law because you're not in compliance with law. Mike, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so with regard to age restricted communities, so age is one of the prohibitions when it comes to discrimination. You can't discriminate by age when it comes to housing, except there is a carve out for 55 and older communities, and believe it or not, for 62 and older communities as well. But there's very few of those in the state. So with regard to 55 and older communities, the statute that permits this age discrimination says that you need to have at least 80% of the residents in the community age 55 or older. Okay, so virtually all of the governing documents say that. However, there are some governing documents that go beyond that, and they say you cannot own a unit in the community unless you are aged 55 or older. That, I believe, is a prohibition that would need to be amended out of your governing documents. Some of the old associations, some of the older ones built in the 60s and 70s that are age restricted do have that language in there. Earlier this morning, I went through a set of governing documents that had a restriction stating that you needed to be 52 or older, which does not comply with that little carve out from the federal government that allows age restrictions. So that one will need to be addressed. So there are some nuanced provisions in the governing documents that I think we're going to have to look at. Fran and I were speaking earlier about some prohibitions or some restrictions talking about transfers to spouses with regard to age restrictions. In other words, if somebody in the unit is 55 or older, they pass away, their spouse will be permitted to reside in the unit, even if they're under the age of 55. In the law against discrimination, marital status and familial status is specifically listed as something in which you cannot discriminate against. So we're kind of going through and working our way through finding out which provisions would have to be looked at a little more carefully. Let's put it that way.
Yep. So that's good. And so there was some question, two things. There was a question on the side, and we'll get into the questions themselves. There was a request to send out the New Jersey Department of Health summary as to the current COVID guidance. Eileen will send that out to everybody after today's session. And then there was also a request for the new statute as to discrimination in restrictive covenants. And same thing, Eileen will send that out afterward to everybody. The other thing I wanted to mention, it's funny. Sometimes I think these legislators, they're stuck inside with COVID and or with the COVID issues, and they think of new things for us to deal with, right? New things for board members and lawyers and property managers to wrangle with. So for all of you who remember, in 2020, we had the Radburn regulations that came out that really tweaked association elections in the middle of a pandemic. And we are seeing a little bit more of that. I think they just want to give us things to think about while we are isolating or quarantining. So we'll have to deal with the discrimination issue. The other thing that came out is, this is a federal law. It's a regulation. It's referred to generically as Regulation F. It's not on today's agenda, but I just wanted to mention it real quick because it came out mid-November, I believe. Regulation F applies under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So we are rolling out, and this doesn't apply to many of you, but it will apply to quite a few of you in terms of whether or not. So just so you know, from a practice standpoint, we get very, very few collection cases in our 55 and older communities, right? So we do collections for people who don't pay their association dues. Most active adult communities do not have a lot of delinquent accounts, which is great, knock on wood. But for those of you in market rate units, we often do get cases involving people who don't pay their assessments. And Regulation F provides new guidelines and some new requirements for those who collect debt. And so you'll see, well, you should see shortly, I think we're among the early adopters in terms of implementing Regulation F. You'll see collection attorneys in the association world modifying their collection letters. They're going to be requesting new documentation from the property management companies because there have to be certain dates provided in the new notice in the initial collection letter. And there has to be new different language in the collection letter in order for the debt collector, in this case us, to come within the safe harbor of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So maybe that's a topic for another day. Excuse me, that's a topic for another day, but it should be talked about because for those of you who don't know, hey, Paul, I love your background. Sorry, I was distracted by Paul's background with the signers of the Constitution there. That's great. But under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, if a debt collector fails to comply, the debt collector is subject not only to suit by the particular debtor, also is subject to suit in a class action case that could be applied in a class action setting with respect to all debtors that debt collector dealt with in a 1-year period. So these suits, if the things are not done properly, turn into very, very big cases. That being said, Mike, you want to switch over to the questions?
Sure. Let's start at the top here. Couple Happy New Years.
That's
Fran,
good.
The best show in town. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Looks like a lot of people were drinking today. That's wonderful.
Excellent.
I think as Fran mentioned,
I like the
Eileen
cab
will
there,
send out
Bruce.
the URLs.
Go ahead. Oh yeah, so we'll send the actual document, and I think the URL is at the bottom of the document when Eileen sends it.
All right, Beth has a question here, Fran. It says, can we require our vendors to show vaccination status?
Yes, I think it's a good idea. Yes. You know, so let me just expand on that a little bit. The problem in today's world with vendors is, can you get vendors to show up and do the work? That's a huge problem right now, right? In terms of the vendors getting workers themselves, and then the vendors, if they are even able to get bodies to show up, can they get people who will comply with what you request? So that's the balancing act. It's difficult right now to impose certain condition on various vendors and their employees. So it's a balance. But the answer to the best question is yes.
John had a comment here, and I think it's well taken. It says, we stopped any activities in our clubhouse that would prevent the wearing of a mask, such as the consumption of food or beverage. And again, John, I think that's a smart idea, especially depending on the community makeup. But especially today, for the next, hopefully only couple weeks, who knows how long, I think everybody needs to be a little more conservative. Like Fran said, I think we all know, if we don't currently have COVID right now, we certainly all know somebody that's homesick with COVID. So that's a point well taken there.
Okay. Let's see. I think Wayne has a comment out there. So Wayne says, I found out that if you were vaccinated at one of the federal mega sites, the state of New Jersey doesn't necessarily know the details of that, so it won't be reflected in their records. He says, for example, they had my second, but not my first shot. And he finally gave up trying to get them to make the correction. So be aware, Wayne's highlighting the fact that if you got vaccinated at a federal mega site, it may not have rolled into the New Jersey Department of Health database, and it may not show up on that docket app. So, you know, be careful. And certainly if you have a card, take a picture of it and keep it on your phone regardless, right? Everyone's doing that already, but you know, don't rely just on that docket site. Do you want to go with Jonathan's comment?
Sure. John has a comment. He says, my experience is that when you need to allow an overnight for the docket to update the app, it maintains a Twitter account to resolve issues, including missing date of vaccination. So I guess that's how you can contact them via Twitter. Jim has a question about the discriminatory legislation. It says, if one finds discriminatory language in their governing documents, do they need to get 2/3 of the community to approve a change, or does the board just make the change since they are legally mandated? So, Jim, this is actually addressed in the legislation itself, and it states that if we do find something, there's no membership involvement. The board passes it just like you would a resolution. It's an administrative amendment to the governing documents, and we're done. So it's an easy fix.
It still has to be recorded though, guys.
Correct.
Oh, hey, Joe. I didn't see Joe there, Joe Schultz. Let's see, Wayne posted some of the pages there. Ann says, hey, did I understand that an association board can vote to update the governing documents without the owners when the law has changed? That's right. That's basically what Mike was just speaking to. It's as a matter of law, so it almost becomes an administrative amendment to conform the documents. You want to go with Craig's comment there, Mike?
Sure. Craig asks, how many associations have been sued by individuals or their estates alleging negligence in contributing to a COVID case and consequences? And with how extensively Omicron is transmitting, what is the likelihood of proving infection occurred in a particular case? I can give you some background on what I know just talking with professionals in the industry. So as of a couple months ago, my understanding was in New Jersey, there were a handful of lawsuits filed against community associations. They pertained mostly to the beginning of the pandemic when the first shutdown happened. And lawsuits were filed. I do not know the extent of them. I don't know how they were resolved. I know at least one of them, at least this is what I'm told by the insurance brokers, at least one of them stemmed from an association not opening their amenities and getting sued from the owners because they had closed down one or more amenity. And it's my understanding that at least one of the other cases pertained to individuals that did get sick. I don't have any information on it. And again, this was from an insurance broker in the industry, one of the largest ones in the industry. And our office has not dealt directly with any of those cases. Fran, I don't know if you have anything else to offer there.
I have not seen any, I can tell you, I've not seen any certainly successful claims against association for that. And also, I think Craig is alluding to the fact that as coronavirus has become more pervasive and endemic, it's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to show where it came from, right? You'd have to say, this was Mom. Mom lived in a bubble for 2.5 years. And then one day she walked out and came to a keg party at the association and you gave her COVID and killed her, right? So that's going to be a tough case from the personal injury side of things. So I don't see that right now, but I don't know enough about microbiology to know whether or not a strain, for example, can be traced. I'm not so sure. I don't know how these things mutate. And some of these experts on personal injury plaintiff cases can come up with all types of theories in terms of trying things, taking a shot at it. I would be a little bit more comfortable if the immunity statute had been extended. I think Governor Murphy could have helped himself a lot with the community association crowd, right? If he had helped us along, and I think he still may. I'm hoping he still does. Cross our fingers. But I think you're right, Craig, if you're suggesting that it's going to be very difficult for a personal injury attorney to prove causation there. Anna notes that, hey, she says there's an app out there called Vaccine Passport that allows you to upload license and Vax card information. The only thing that I would suggest is, and I don't know this with respect to docket or with respect to Vaccine Passport, just be careful where you load your information because there are scammers and scumbags all over the internet. And we want to make sure that someone is not showing up as Fran McGovern somewhere and bouncing checks all over New Jersey, because that would be really awkward for me. So be careful with your online information and your online profile. And whatever you do, don't put naked pictures of yourself on Twitter. Keep them to yourself. Go ahead, Mike, with Muriel.
This is talking about the docket. It's apparently working now. Somebody else had mentioned if you restart it, it should work.
Okay, great.
Paul said, you missed my question about vaccination status versus hospitalization and deaths.
Yes, so thanks, Paul. I saw Paul somewhere down there. I don't know where he went. So, Paul, there are statistics broken out the way you describe, and they're on the CDC website. I don't have enough time today to go through each page, but if you want to talk about it next week, we can. Or you can just go to the CDC website and you can play around with all the various settings, and it will show it slices and dices the information super granularly, by vaccination status, by type of vaccination, I think, by race, color, creed, national origin, economic status, et cetera, et cetera. So you can slice and dice the data any way you can do that. And like I said, the bad thing about the CDC website is it's almost an information overload, that there's so much information that it almost overwhelms you and therefore becomes meaningless. So you got to take from it what you can get. But Paul, I would definitely go out there and check it out. And if you want to talk about it, give me a buzz next week. Mike, I think Chuck has one.
Yeah, so Chuck's providing a little information here. He said, I had to delete all of the previous search results and then do a search, and all 3 shots now appear. So it provides the information here. It's to remove the old search results. You select a search result, say no to view it, and then hit the trash to delete it.
Wow.
Repeat on all of the old results, and then once deleted, do another search and select yes to view. And then it should update it for you.
I love that. Chuck, you're hired. You're hired. I'll see you on Monday. Uh, George says fully vaccinated status has evolved. Should associations require booster status now as well? So based on the summary COVID guidance that I put up on the screen earlier, it seems that so-called fully vaccinated now means you got the booster shot, right? I mean, generally speaking, you got the booster shot, or you fall within those little narrow timeframes of 6 months with respect to Pfizer and Moderna, and 2 months with respect to J&J. Everyone's down on J&J this year. I don't know why. I always thought they were a pretty good company. But anyway, everyone's down on J&J. If it's not, if it's not the COVID shot, it's the talcum powder. Who thought J&J, right? But anyway, so I think to the point is the fully vaccinated now is generally, I think, considered with the booster shot. So unless you're in the narrow time frames. Go ahead, Mike.
The next question says, how would you explain to the residents of a HOA that requiring vaccination for access to amenities is not discriminatory? And I think the answer is, it is discriminating against people that are not vaccinated, but it's not illegal to discriminate. It's only illegal to discriminate with specific things. Age, when it comes to housing, age, race, sexual orientation, etc. Like if you wanted to have some people over to watch a football game this weekend and you're a Giants fan, you can discriminate by not asking people that are Washington fans to come to the game. That's completely permissible. So it's not illegal, it's permitted.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, Mike. As I've said many times, if there was no discrimination permitted in the United States, I would not be doing this seminar today. I would be pitching for the Yankees. But I am slow and old, sorry. So let's see. So Paul has a question, but in Mama's case, the association would have to pay for parents' paid. Well, thanks, Paul. I'm always in favor of getting paid. Ray, hello, Frank. It's nice to see you, Ray. Let's see. I have, Laura. What is the big deal that the legislator didn't? Okay. So what is the big deal that the legislature didn't just renew the immunity statute? Mike and I have been going back and forth with this over the past 2 weeks. Why didn't the legislature? It was a no-brainer, right? It's a no-brainer, a way to get votes out of thousands and thousands of association members. And the answer is, I don't know. Back in 2020, when these issues first came out of the governor's office, there was some suggestion that the governor felt that encouraging immunity for associations would encourage reckless conduct, right? So there was a feeling that if there was immunity for the associations wouldn't clean properly, the association would have crazy parties, the association would have crazy pool parties, everyone would be hugging all over each other, spitting, breathing all over each other, etc. I don't think that's the case with any associations that I work with, but at least that was some of the vibe that was coming out of the governor's office. There has also been some rumbling, right, that the plaintiffs' attorneys of the world perhaps want the opportunity to take a shot at these types of cases. I don't know that that's true. I have not heard any of that in the bar associations that we're involved in. It could be nothing more than it just didn't rise to the top of their legislative agenda high enough or fast enough before the legislative session ended. Just because it didn't happen this legislative session, I don't think means it's dead forever, that it can't be introduced in this legislative session. And I would encourage you that you reach out to your representatives and to the governor's office and said, hey, this is a good idea. It worked before. It was in place before. The associations did the right thing. The associations did not go crazy when there was immunity out there. And we would really like to have this type of protection again. Okay. Mike, you want to jump on the next one?
Yeah, so Wayne had provided a page with all the information previously. Pam writes, our HOA requires all unvaccinated individuals to wear a face mask at all times while in the HOA facilities. and also require all homeowners residents to sign the waiver agreement to be able to enter and to use the facilities. Everyone that has signed a waiver has been issued a wristband and is required to be worn at all times while in the facilities. Yeah, Pam, I think that's really organized and makes a lot of sense. Commend you on the efforts there. That's great.
I got to catch up to you here. Wayne's page, just so Wayne was referencing a page that he put out there as a PDF earlier in the comments. Let's see, what else? You did.
Fran, I'll read the next one for you. It says, this is from Chuck. It says, can boards require that the members of the board be fully vaccinated? Are we asking our employees as a condition of employment? You want to take that, Fran?
So I think the answer to both of them is yes and yes. But the question is it reasonable, right? Is it reasonable? So I would say if you have a board that is meeting virtually all the time, not meeting live at all, why would it be reasonable to mandate vaccination, right? There's no contact, there's no coming to board workshop meetings, they're not meeting live as liaisons with the finance committee, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a good argument by a board member that just doesn't want to be vaccinated and is not interested in doing things like coming to the party and so forth, to say, listen, it's all remote anyway, so therefore I don't want to get vaccinated. And by the way, even if it is live, I can still remote in just like I could do during the pre-COVID days. So people got to remember that even pre-COVID, a board member could attend a live board meeting from Florida via speakerphone. That was totally legal pre-COVID. I mean, some people think that's a total revolution because of COVID, but it's not. You could attend a meeting virtually as long as the membership could hear you from Florida and you could hear what was going on down in Florida. So it would have to be reasonable, Chuck. Are associations able to ask employees as a condition of employment? Yes, I think as long as it's reasonable, employers are allowed to. Again, you have to be very careful with employees because there are various laws that apply to how to handle them, especially with respect to both religious and health exemptions. Very, very careful. I would have to say, and I'm doing a seminar for CAI on this coming up, I think. Many associations could use to upgrade how they deal with their employment practices in the association context, even if they don't have direct employees, because there are many arguments out there that associations are co-employers of the management company staff. So you got to be very careful. You got to be very careful with that. Jim says, because lawyers' donations are more important than association voices. You know, Jim, I wish I could say that money doesn't matter in politics, but you know, I think I would be lying if I said that. Hey, Dina, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a long time. Dina has a question. How do you monitor mask wearing in a large clubhouse? Isn't it hard to enforce? Yeah, it's very hard to enforce. It's very hard to enforce. But if you're going to control things, you have to take reasonable steps to enforce your rules and regulations. And I hate to say this, but we did run to this a couple times last year. If people can't play by the rules, then associations are going to have to shut down facilities. I had an association that had several amenities where they, for a long time in 2020, tried to keep them open in a reasonable fashion, and people just weren't doing the right thing. So then the board came in and shut them down, and then the board was maligned for being, you know, fascist in trying to get the people to do the right thing. Well, that's just not right. So we're all grown-ups. People should not have to be, you know, in a wrestling match to put their mask on. You see all these crazy videos on airplanes these days. Dina, you are going to wind up with having an enforcement issue. If people are not going to comply, I would say then whatever your rules and regulations are, you should shut down that facility if they're not complying. Go ahead, Mike.
Let's see. It said, would you advise Zoom meetings for at least the end of for the month of January, through the month of January? What I would advise that we keep Zoom meetings pretty much forever to a limited extent. So a lot of times it is more effective for especially executive meetings to be held via Zoom. especially when you want to have your accountant jump in for 15 minutes and explain a question you have on the audit, or the lawyer come in to go through collections, or a landscaper ask, address a couple questions. It just seems to be more effective, more cost effective. The meetings tend to not run as long. It seems to be more to the point. At least that's what I've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years. So there's no prohibition to address Chip's question. How long can we keep doing them? There was the law that was passed at the beginning of the pandemic permitting annual election meetings to be held via Zoom throughout the course of the pandemic in a state of emergency. Regular board meetings, executive session meetings, they can continue to be held like that indefinitely. Fran, was there an extension on that legislation? I don't recall off the top of my head.
I did not see an extension on that one either. A lot of me thinks that was unnecessary to begin with, but that's going to be debated among lawyers for the next 6 months or so. So I'm very much in favor of Zoom meetings. Some associations were slow to adopt Zoom meetings or remote meetings. Some associations don't use Zoom; they use another facility. But a couple things that we have seen: larger attendance numbers in associations where especially a decent size or decent proportion of the population works in the city, right? So when you have associations where people are still working, and if they're working in the city, they're not getting home till 8 o'clock at night anyway. But a lot of those people will stay in the office and come to a Zoom meeting at 6 o'clock and attend the meeting for an hour and stay. So we have seen added participation in a lot of associations for Zoom. The other thing that we've seen an advantage of is the share screen function is awesome, right? Because either the manager, whether it's Jeff Schiffman or somebody else, can say, hey, Fran, you know what? I sent you that picture about the drainage swale that we're going to rebuild, blah, 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 blah. And I can, during the middle of the meeting, say, hey, Jeff, people are wondering why this is a $60,000 job. Let me show the area that the association is going to have to deal with, right? And it's not like back in the day before the Zoom and everything else, where you'd have to put, a slide deck together and in a big presentation about siding, et cetera, whatever. You can just bang it out in real time. I've had a number of associations where they say, Fran, could you just, while we're talking, can you flip up the governing documents section regarding blah, blah, blah? And I can just pause, right, for a second. And while they're talking during the workshop meeting, I can go on the governing documents and flip them up and show right to the page and put that up on a share screen. So it's an awesome thing. So I think Zoom has been really good for everything. In addition, the spouses of association attorneys love it because we get home much earlier at night. So it has really decreased the divorce rate among association attorneys. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm going to skip down a little bit here. It says, Deanna wrote, just to be clear, the bylaws can be amended by a vote of the board if they are only changed to comply with the law, such as Radburn regulation changes. So yes, that's correct. This new legislation is different in the fact that it places an affirmative obligation. We need to act within 90 days of this being passed to ensure that we comply with the law against discrimination. And then when we find specific things that need to be amended, yes, it's done by the board at a meeting. They just pass it and then record it. No membership involvement whatsoever. The Radburn law provided authority for the board to also modify their governing documents if something conflicted with any law, whether it's the law against discrimination or some other law. So if your notice provisions for your annual elections were different from the Radburn law notice provisions, then the board can go in and change that without getting the membership involved.
Okay, I mean, that seems like it. So Jeff is saying the spouses of property managers love it too. That's right. High five to Jeff. Although, I also have heard the flip side of it. Sometimes they're like, so who are you again and why are you here in my house? So it plays both ways. Sometimes the spouse is like, why are you home and why are you bothering me? But anyway, so Zoom has been really good. We're encouraging people to use it. But we thank all of you so much. We're going to wrap it up. There's no other questions. We really enjoyed it today. We had a great turnout. We still have 143 people on the call. Thank you so much for staying. We really appreciate it. And thank you for the time and have a great weekend. Nice seeing everybody.